Welcome everyone to the 10th episode of the Paleoconnection. Today we have a special guest, Fabio from Brazil, and we're going to be discussing various topics, Brazilian politics, right-wing, specifically right-wing politics, perhaps abortion, and religion as well. Fabio is from a Discord channel called God's Soldiers, and I just want to read a brief description of what God's Soldiers is. God's Soldiers is a radical traditional Catholic server, a safe haven for right-wing politics, including fascism and third positions. Non-Catholics are welcome, but anti-Catholic proselytizing will be censored. We strive to be mature, edifying people, building others up, not tearing them down. And we strongly desire ambitious, motivated people with grand ideals to come join and network with us. So this is the Discord channel that Fabio is a part of, and that will come into the discussion, I'm sure, as we talk to him. But before we start, I would like Fabio to give a brief introduction of himself. So Fabio, why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Good morning to you and to the hearers too. My name's Fabio. I'm pretty young, as I've told him before this call, and I try to learn as much as possible. I try to be the best version of me as I can, and with Catholicism, with praying, with the help of the Lord, I can try to do that. I have some, I wouldn't say extreme, but views that people don't really correlate to my age. But I try to talk normally about them. I don't try to make a big deal out of them. That's about it.
Okay, so why don't we talk about some of those views then? One of the views that you have told me that you hold is anarchocapitalism viewpoint. Mm-hmm. So why don't you talk a little bit about why you're an anarchocapitalist and how you became one?
I used to be on the neocon side, but a friend of mine he started to talk to me. He mocked me a bit, of course, because he was a bit arrogant, but he talked to me. He tried to ask me how the things I believed in would work, how the things I believed in would actually be efficient, how the things I believed in would be correct to do. And when I was questioned about that, when he mentioned anarchocapitalism itself, I started to think to myself what was the right course of action. So I started to search. So I started to dig deep into it. I started to read books. I started to improve my own mindset, So it was through analysis of what actually worked and what was ethical that I found myself to belong to that. Even so, anarchocapitalism itself is a group that varies a lot in the people that believe in it. So, although there is the central point of being against the state and in favor of the individual, you don't really have much of a connection between us, between anarcho-capitalists. So again, I don't make a big deal out of it. I just try to talk to people to find out what they believe in and try to converse with them, to rationalize with them, which a lot of other anarcho-capitalists do too.
Okay. So can you give the audience just a brief description of like the kind of things an anarcho-capitalist believes?
Okay. So, the free markets, as you know, it's the best form of way for people to develop, for people to improve their own life situation, and through the inherently unethical things that the state does and the state itself. For example, let's say a big thing to talk about is taxation, but there's also regulation and cartelization of the markets and things of that sort. But I will make to taxation. A big point in anarcho-capitalism is that taxation is theft because you haven't agreed to that. To that payment, and you are forced to pay it because you were born somewhere, not because you actually decided to see those services that the government provides and pay for them. No, because otherwise you wouldn't have even chose them because they are already bad. Because let's say, of healthcare, people don't usually want to pay for public healthcare because they already pay for a private healthcare. You are paying for the same thing twice. And if you don't pay for that, you could be jailed, you could be harassed, you could be a lot of things. So through just that and through regulations that try to change the way the market works instead of letting it go free, which does help the people. Because through a free market, as you see in, for example, Hong Kong, that is now being attacked by China, we see that it's a very developed place, a very developed region. Because again, it used to be, I don't know about now, but because of all the China trouble, but it used to be a really free region in regards to economic development and economic well-being, we could say.
Okay.
That's about it.
Sure. Let me just jump in for a second here. So, anarcho-capitalism, what you say is one of the main beliefs is that tax is theft, and that you'd say like a laissez-faire capitalism where markets are kind of left untouched, with a lot less regulation than nowadays. And one of the other things I've always understood is that so the central government is going to be eliminated under this system. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then
I mean, not eliminated, because I haven't seen many revolutionaries, and there is a strong view amongst anarcho-capitalists that revolution is bad and that it wouldn't work anyway. It's more about how people believe that such a thing, the government stopping to interfere in people's lives and eventually stop existing altogether. It is going to be through the people's mindsets that they don't need it anymore. They are going to stop using it. They are going to stop having to pay respect to it, you could say, because the way technology is going to develop, we're going to be able to get free from it. We won't need to owe Caesar anymore.
So you believe that basically through the advancement of technology, we're going to reach a point where people will, choose their services and no longer rely on a government, right?
Mm-hmm. But also through with sharing the idea. But yeah, the development of technology is gonna possibilitate that a lot easier to be done.
Sure, and I guess
a lot more easily.
And I guess I can also understand that, we might be at a point now where it's not quite possible to achieve it, but anarcho-capitalism is really useful as a criticism and as a tool to understand, kind of what we should be doing, now, right?
Mm-hmm. Because again, it's not revolutionary. We don't preach that we should just start enforcing our idea. Even more so because we aren't violent, We don't preach violence. We preach the sharing of ideas. We preach that one should be allowed to say whatever he wants to say. Okay, excluding actual threats, because threats are violence. As for example, if I say that I'm going to kill you tomorrow, if I actually have a possibility of killing you tomorrow, then that would be a threat, so not allowed. But that's because that's a threat of violence. That's insinuating you are gonna start violence. But other than that, and very few things that still correlate to the threat thing, still correlate to the direct physical violence and the direct possibility of physical violence. Or meaning, it is plausible that that physical thing will happen. There isn't anything that we can stop other people from saying.
Okay, so while
because we are entitled to our own viewpoints, and we are entitled to speak in our mind on what we believe in, on what we want to say. That's it.
Okay. So listening to kind of what you said, to me, I mean, it sounds a lot just like libertarianism. What would you say separates libertarianism from the way you believe anarcho-capitalism to be? Is it that in anarcho-capitalism, eventually, kind of like in communism, I guess, you expect the state to gradually fall away and then there's a stateless society, whereas libertarians would say, no, we always need to have a state, but the state should be drastically restricted to the powers that it has. Is that the difference between the two, or how do you see a difference between just being a libertarian and an anarcho-capitalist?
The only difference that I see, or at least most of it, because you aren't saying economic liberal, you're saying a libertarian. The things that libertarians still believe that the state has a purpose, that the state has a use in society, or that it's ethical to be there, while anarcho-capitalists do not. That's the main difference, and the only one that comes to mind right now. But you talked about communism. As far as I know, the main viewpoints that people have when they are communists is a revolutionary stance, is a stance of trying to regulate people too. Let's say through the vote, they try to elect someone that would be trying to, for instance, try to create a health system, a public health system. Meanwhile, that isn't how anarcho-capitalists believe in. At least generally, that they don't believe the vote makes much of a difference. It may be enough to avoid getting too deep into things that will, for example, someone that promises high high taxation. Anarchocapitalists could vote against someone if they vote at all, because again, they don't believe that it works much. But I could vote against that person in order to not be as hurt, we could say, not be as limited as they would be with that person in power. But we don't preach that we should regulate people. We don't preach that we should be trying to control people's lives. We are just trying to live our own life and have people live their own lives. If they want us to have someone overseeing them, it's fine too. Just don't try to force me into something that I do not agree with. That's it.
Okay, go ahead, Verve.
Changing a little bit from more of the philosophical side and bringing it down to more of the how things really are. I really enjoyed when you said earlier that you get people who, they don't even want to pay for their public health care, their socialist health care, because they have to get this private health care on the side, and it's like they're paying for it twice because the service that they get from the government is so bad. And it made me think of how, and this may be the case in Brazil as well, how in some countries you actually find regular middle-class people need to get their own security services. And even in the United States, you have people who live in gated communities to be more secure. So it's like you're already paying the government all this money for police protection, but they don't really give it to you on a good level. So you have to get a private security system. You have to even get a company to help you. So I was wondering, do you think Brazil is a country that suffers a lot from paying taxes for services that really you don't get to use that much?
Yeah, it does. But I wouldn't say that it's just Brazil. Because you see, everywhere we can see a trend of the governmental services not working properly, because inherently governmental services do not need to adapt to the demands that there is to it. They don't need to adapt to their offer to match that demand, because they are going to receive anyways. It's not like you can stop giving them their payments, their taxation, because if you do, you just get arrested. And if you resist, you're gonna die. You see? So yeah, you can see a trend in Brazil too, that governmental services are not efficient by nature.
How do you specifically find those services? Like, for example, what's your experience with like the police force in the city where you're from in Brazil? Is it generally helpful? If you call them, do they respond promptly? Do you have to wait 20 minutes? Can you trust them, or is it not even worth calling them?
I know a few policemen, and they are fine, but let's say you said about waiting 20 minutes during a call. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I tried to report someone that was walking suspiciously, towards a post, gas post. And when I tried to do that, I spent 20 minutes saying the same location over and over and over and over again, because they didn't want to work. When I tried to report something that could be ongoing, for example, he could be mugging that gas post, because for all it seemed that was the case, since he also looked to have a gun and he was walking suspiciously towards somewhere that in the middle of the night someone without a car doesn't really go to, and it's not uncommon to hear of robberies here. So you can we can see that. Oh, I lost myself.
Oh yeah, you can definitely see how it's very inefficient.
Yeah. You can definitely see that they didn't want to work because they're gonna end in the end of the month too. They have a fixed salary. They don't work based on how much they work. They don't work based on cases they solve. It's just an hourly schedule. They just stay there for a couple of hours, and then they are gonna be paid at the end of the month. There is little things they can do to actually improve that situation. And those things aren't necessarily correlated to the service they provide. It's more related to how they're going to get the next rank and how fit they are. Rather than that, that's it.
This actually kind of reminds me of a very famous film in the U.S. called Serpico, which was about the corrupt police system in New York City and how one police officer who was refusing to receive bribes and actively trying to just only do the right thing came under pressure from all the other police, because if one guy is trying to do the right thing all the time, it makes all of them feel guilty. It also, destroys this culture of corruption. So I imagine even in a place like Brazil or, wherever in the world, even when somebody is trying to do a really good job and trying to rise above the situation, the other people in the government will just discourage them and not even think of it as an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, pretty much. Because as with many other governmental institutions, it's the culture there to not really work that much. They just do what they need to do, but other than that, they avoid more work. And with, let's say, the police, they avoid actually being efficient because they don't really have a need to be efficient. And when they are, it's because the governor, because I believe it's governor here, tries to put pressure on them with this pandemic, to force people to stay home, which is also something that anarcho-capitalists are against, at least. The ones that they should be against it because it's directly violates people's freedom. But anyways, when they aren't trying to force people to stay home, it's, I wouldn't say rare, because they don't live in a really bad region, we could say. But in the bad regions, they almost never show up. But now that they are trying to force people home, I see a police car like every corner of the street. Because now they are trying to enforce something that was passed on to them, that now they have to do. But it's not that they are protecting people. They are forcing people to stay home. They are attacking people's freedom. Now they are showing up. And with any branch of the state, with any arm branch of the state, we can see that it's more about keeping it in power and keeping its powers fortified rather than actually provide something to the people. It's a way for it to say that with the police that I'm keeping you safe. I'm keeping you from hurting others and yourself. When in reality, it's more of a propaganda method to say that you are protecting the citizen when all you're doing is trying to justify what you do in using that power of protection, right? To enforce your laws and enforce your regulations and enforce your prohibitions that aren't going to actually protect the citizen, upon him, upon her, upon their weaker parts, because that's what a citizen is. The citizen is the weaker part between the government and himself. That's it.
You talked a bit about the COVID-19 crisis there, so I just want to just dig into that a little bit. And you said that there are police sitting on the corners enforcing, I don't know if you're saying they're enforcing quarantine rules or something like that. So the situation like that is something that you are against. You would be against, obviously, the government forcing you to stay in your home even during this supposed crisis.
Yeah, I would be against that, as anarchocapitalists would too, because again, that's a direct violation of people's freedom.
Okay, and how like are they actually enforcing that? Do you see people frequently being arrested that have disobeyed the quarantine rules? Is this something that you see often there?
In the start, there were quite a few cases, but I think that even amongst the police, they have just stopped caring for a bit. Just like before, like I said, they don't really have an incentive to work. But sometimes we can hear people getting fined. We can hear about people getting jail too, but not as often as we did at the start of it all. That's it.
Okay, sure. Verve, would you like to take this another direction, or would you like me?
Just on the coronavirus a bit more. Bolsonaro, of course, was very famous for, I think at the beginning, saying that this is just some kind of very strong flu and it's not going to have a really big effect. And I think kind of treating it like it was some sort of hoax. I don't really know all the details about it, but even in the international news, we were hearing a lot about Bolsonaro. Oftentimes, a lot of the information we get on him is directly translated from NGOs and other groups that are very anti-Bolsonaro. So, I don't know really what to make of it. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on Bolsonaro and the coronavirus and the kind of position that he has on it?
He's a politician, so I wouldn't say that I like him because he's already a part of the government. But he's one of the least worst things that could happen right now, because you see he has quite a few problems. For example, with Paulo Guedes, he is Minister of Economy, trying to impose a few more taxes and things of that sort, or actually centralize taxes, because I think that he's gonna tax books now, Paulo Guedes. But compared to the rest of the Brazilian politics, including, for instance, Amoedo, which people thought to be a libertarian or economic liberal, which he hasn't shown himself to be, hasn't shown himself to be a minarchist, as MBL, Movimento Brasil Livre, hasn't too. They've tried to enforce this quarantine too, with one of their members actually going out in the streets to shame people through, for instance, Jew parties, and try to jail them. So again, Bolsonaro is the one that is the least worst option right now. Now, considering what they say about him, a lot of it is lies, especially if you saw it translated from, I don't know, Globo or Band. So I think that Band is a bit better in that regard, but not by much. You can see that they hate him, and they even try to say that he said it's a hoax as far as I understand the meaning of it, that it wouldn't be real. But he doesn't claim that it's not real. He does claim that it's not that little. It's not that
Lethal.
that it's not that something that should be so worried about. Yeah, little. Yeah, you get the point. It's not something that we should be making such a huge alarm over, which is being done right now. He did claim it's sort of like a flu, a strong flu. But he did go through it. He did get infected, and he went through it fine. He went through it fine. As have many other people. And when we see the amount of people that have died due to COVID, I can't say the name because of YouTube, right? When we see the number of people that have died due to the Chinese sickness, the Chinese virus, we can see that there's a trend of people that are being placed as they died of COVID, when they died with COVID, but didn't die from it, or they died of something else that's, let's say, for instance, had respiratory problems with it, so they associated it with COVID, or when they just don't know the cause of death, they just put COVID in their report. So the numbers too are highly inflated, you know. That's it. Thank you for listening a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because that's something that has sparked some interest in the U.S. as well. Inflated numbers that have been caused by, people who just don't know the cause of death, so they write COVID. And as you said, many COVID deaths have multiple factors involved, different respiratory illnesses that are underlying factors that patients have, and the COVID exacerbates it or makes it worse, but it's not, you couldn't really say it's the cause of death. It's just like one of the many factors. So there are a lot of people who believe that in the U.S. as well. So kind of just wrapping up your thoughts on Bolsonaro, you kind of alluded to the fact that, because he is a politician, you're in a way against him because as an anarcho-capitalist, you aren't in favor of the state having so much power. But would you say that he is, in a sense, an ally in some ways to some of your beliefs, as you are Catholic and you would describe yourself as right-wing and Bolsonaro as right-wing? Do you, even though he's a politician, do you see him as, let's say, if you had to pick a side, right? He is on your side, isn't he?
Yeah, we could say that a bit because we had a few influencers here in Brazil that are anarcho-capitalists, that they sided with Bolsonaro because of an alliance, because they tried to use the fact that he was trying to be against the pandemic to try to not be as harsh on people with all this quarantine stuff. So yeah, we could say that he's an ally, a temporary ally at that.
Against the left. He's an ally against the left, in the simplest terms to say it.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the Discord channel that you are a member of, God's Soldiers, it's described as a radical traditional Catholic server. Could you describe some of the views that might be radical that you hold?
We can now go to the 10-year-old girl abortion thing to exemplify it. I'm against even her aborting, because as we have said, called previously to Brennan, even if there is risk to the life of the mother, even if it's has been fruit of rape, even if the case is both things. It doesn't justify sacrificing a human life because of what may be best for the mother. If we have someone that may die because of, let's say, organ failure, we can't kill someone in order to give that other person's organ to that person. Same goes with abortion. We can't kill a baby in order to try and save a mother. We can try to help the mother live. We can try to make measures like, for instance, as the Catholic Church also supports, if the mother has a tumor, we can try to remove that tumor, and that may make the baby not survive the whole ordeal, but never directly killing the baby, never having the objective being to kill that baby. The objective is to try and help the mother live, not help the baby die. Two different things. And with the 10-year-old girl example, she had been, can you give me a word similar to the R word so that YouTube doesn't get on her feet about it?
She was sexually assaulted.
Yeah. That's word. She was by her uncle and got pregnant from him after about 4 years of that, 3 to 4 years of that. And it's a really sad situation, because if she did give birth, which she didn't, she aborted, unfortunately, she would be in high risk of life, and it had been fruit of the words you just said. It had been fruit of that. So it's a tragedy. But when we see the left talking about it, we see them celebrating the fact that there was an abortion. Not even for the mother that stayed alive, the 10-year-old that remains alive, but because they had ideologically won a 6-month-old baby killed, and they were happy about it. We see if the 10-year-old had given birth, people would be making a saint out of her. People would be celebrating the fact that she did the right thing by saving the baby, and there were already people trying to adopt that baby of hers. But with the left, they are celebrating that the baby died. They are celebrating that they were able to make their ideology go through even the law, because 6-month-old babies, that isn't even legal to abort anymore. Even if you are going to rape or risk of life of the mother. So I believe that is one extreme view I have, because I'm against abortion in all cases, which isn't something I've seen a lot of people be against, even amongst anarchocapitalists too, or even amongst the general populace. That's it.
You want to jump in? Bert?
Sure. I guess an interesting angle, though, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'd always thought that, so if we have a society with no government and people depend on, corporations or companies or just their own choice of private organization, or just be off by themselves for having no law, no government really. How would abortion work then? Because it seems like, sadly, abortion is popular. I'm pro-life as well, but, we have to admit, even in the U.S. or something, it seems that it's very entrenched and will never really undo it. And there isn't that much popularity in trying to get the movement going to abolish abortion. It seems like in an anarchist situation, abortion would inevitably just be occurring. So, what would you have to say about that? How would abortion work in kind of, in a situation where there is no government?
So you talk about no governments, and I did speak about governments a lot, but it's more about the states than government itself, because the governments can be voluntary. For instance, through private cities. So in those cities that you agree to be part of, you agree to partake in, abortion could be not allowed there. There could be a real rule against it, because we aren't against laws per se. We are against laws that aren't private laws, that hurts the individual. We're against those. And laws that hurt the individual are those you don't agree with. Those that try to, for instance, keep you forced at home, keep you from even buying drugs, because drugs are bad, yeah, but it shouldn't be prohibited from buying them, because it's the way you want to go about your own body. You want to go about your own money. You want to spend it on something that isn't going to be good for you, as it would be with alcohol, as it would be with alcohol. So you said, you talked about the government as if it's a way to prevent abortion, for instance, when it truly isn't. When we see the case of the girl that was allowed to have the abortion, and we see the case of the US, in which you are, as a state, not a state of the big state itself, but in the regions, the state regions, that they are forced to also allow abortions. They can't even legalize it. Because most of what we see in democratic governments, in a government too, they try to use demagogy to keep themselves in power. And if abortion is popular, it's gonna be allowed, which it is in the US. So even if there's a stake there, it isn't a guarantee that it won't happen. But as with murder, as with robberies, as with burglary, even with the state, they aren't guaranteed not to happen, as it wouldn't be guaranteed in anarchocapitalism. It just likely wouldn't happen as much, because people would, as they are more individualistic, you will be trying to rely on an exterior agent to try and solve their problems. So they would try to hire their services that they think that would be good, rather than have someone force a bad service upon them. They will likely be armed too. They will likely be able to defend themselves better, as would an abortion clinic, for instance, usually not be allowed. Because another thing too is that the government subverts the natural order of things. For instance, with welfare to, let's say, single mothers, it tries to incentivize a behavior that isn't correct, that isn't what someone should do, as it also incentivizes abortion through not even allowing the US, you guys, to legalize it in a state of yours. It is something that it's really saddening when we see that a lot of babies have died because of it, and a lot more will. That's without a doubt, even during the state. But it's something that's a real reality of life. tragedies are a reality of life. We can't have 100% of the people that are alive that have died to have thought the same exact thing across their whole lives and the same exact thing compared to their peers. But if we respect private property, which babies have too, they have the right to property, to self-property, as do just the mother and the father and everyone around them. People would stop trying to hurt that little baby. People would stop trying to hurt each other too. Not in all cases, of course, but if they value each other's individualist things such as themselves, there's going to be less of a tendency to hurt others' property. That's about it. It's more of a way of thinking that's going to be changed, more than the thing itself. And through the way of thinking, the thing itself will also change.
Okay, to kind of boil down what you said there, it seems to me like what you're trying to say is that if you take anarcho-capitalism to the limits, you would just eliminate all centralized states. There would be no centralized states, and then you would sort of have small, let's say, communities of more voluntary societies where people band together, I would guess, with other like-minded people. And what you're saying is that in this society, let's say you lived in one of these societies, you would then be able to create your own laws. And if people did not agree with them, they could leave that society. And if they did agree with them, they would stay in that society. And perhaps within one of those societies, abortion would be illegal. But then perhaps in a neighboring society that you do not belong to, perhaps they agree that abortion is okay and is legal. So abortion would be happening, but it wouldn't be happening with your approval, let's say, because in your community it's outlawed. Is that kind of fair to say? Is that what you're trying to say?
Kind of, but yeah, it's more about people that think around the same things, that try to have a certain mindset. They can get it together to improve their own community. So yeah, people would tend to focus on people that they agree with, to be with those people.
Yeah, this is taking anarcho-capitalism. Sorry. I was saying this is a situation where I see anarcho-capitalism being taken to the absolute limits. So if anarcho-capitalists got their way and all centralized states were destroyed, then this scenario perhaps could happen. But I fully recognize that what you're saying is that most likely that will never happen. So you're kind of trying to it seemed like you're trying to say that you're trying to push the idea of abortion being wrong and try to work towards that direction instead of visualizing this anarcho-capitalist state where, there's separate voluntary societies.
Mm-hmm. But we see. It's people tend to flock to the ones they agree with. If we talk about the US too, because you guys are from there. If we see the great differences between the states of the US, between the people of the US, for example, from California to Texas, how they differ politically, we can see that the state tries to force everyone into a specific box of people that should belong together, when they really don't want to, and they really shouldn't. Now, you said that I believe that it won't happen. I believe it will happen, just not through a revolution and not through something abrupt. 30 to 40 years time, I believe it's gonna be at least underway, because it's inevitable. It's not that it's something that should be done abruptly or will be done abruptly, but it's gonna happen eventually through the development of people's minds and the development of people's ideas through decentralized information, and also through the development of technology that will allow us to separate ourselves from the big bad wolf, which is the state.
Okay, very
That's
well
it.
said. Verve, want to jump in? Verve, you there?
Oh, hello? Yeah, so I actually kind of agree a lot with what he's saying, in the sense that I think we're going to see a lot more people in the next 30, 40 years try to form communities of their own and everything, because, already you kind of see that. There were some people I knew from oddly enough, a very libertarian forum that eventually did move and all live together with each other in a rural area in Nevada, and to kind of live out their ideals a little bit, because in the 21st century, you can do that. You can just get on an airplane and travel really far and meet like-minded people and just go for it. And so as travel becomes more cheap and everything begins to change, I can see more communities on small scales popping up of people trying to live out their dreams. So I think it's a very interesting vision. And I would also say that I really appreciated what you said earlier about governments subverting the natural order of things. That seems to be like a really common thing, where then people become the worst versions of themselves because the government allows them to be the worst versions of themselves. And there's other factors as well, but you find these scenarios where if you're willing to pay somebody the bare amount of money for them to live and to just stay at home and to not have a job, they will wallow in their addictions to alcohol or drugs and just kind of barely get by. But if everything were to be private and the only way to get your charity is you had to go talk to the priest or anyone else who runs the charity, and they said, hey, you have to be sober for us to give you money, and you have to promise to be sober, you would actually have some strings attached that would allow them to learn how to basically save themselves. But in a large government program, no one really succeeds in saving themselves. I guess those are just two of the observations that I have right now about that.
Pretty much, because you see, when you try to have a centralized way of incentivizing, let's say, people that are unemployed, there isn't much individualism in the way that they do things. As in, if there is they may not allow drug addicts to take the subsidies to help them live, I suppose, without needing to find a job. But maybe that isn't the case for them trying to not allow alcoholics to do that. But through charities, even because charities don't have as much as the government does economically, and they have to spare more, and they have to choose who to help, they may be more strict about who can or who can't get that help, and they may try to help people improve their own situation, so that they don't actively rely on that charity for their whole lives, because the charity, can't eternally sustain those people that don't want to improve. as you said with the priest example, yeah, when we have someone that can't just go around spending as much as he sees fit and has to actually help people rather than get their vote, which the welfare state is just a way for politicians to get a vote rather than actually help people by making them dependent upon the state to, let's say, you are unemployed and someone starts to give you money. You start to not try to find a job anymore. And without that governmental help, you think to be lost. You think that there isn't any way you could live without that. So you start to depend upon that person. Same thing goes for the state. It makes you dependent upon it so that you can't lose it. Because if you do, you feel like you won't be able to even live anymore. You won't be even able to survive anymore. And all that's because the state changed your own way of thinking, your temporal preference. Temporal preference being the fact that, let's say, an investor may think that $100 maybe not something that he needs to spend with, say, food, but rather with something that may give him $1,000 in the future. Meanwhile, someone that is dependent upon the state that has high temporal preference, they will spend that on, I don't know, a needlessly expensive restaurant, expensive cars, expensive hobbies when they could try to spend it on something else. You see? Because they already think that they don't have to work for what they have and they don't have to actually care about what they have, because they always are going to have that big state, that big brother helping them survive, regardless of what they do. That's it.
Okay, Fabio, thank you for those thoughts. I'm just going to ask you one more thing, and then I just want you to give a brief answer to that, and then we're going to go to a final part that we like to conclude with, which we call a lightning round, where we're going to ask you a few questions where we just want like really quick one-word answers or, one or two sentence answers. But before we get to that, I just want to briefly know what does the state of Catholicism look like in Brazil these days? In most of the Western world, religion has sort of waned in popularity, Christianity specifically, although I have seen within recent years perhaps a new tide turning. But what is it like in Brazil? Is Catholicism something that seems to be waning or becoming more popular?
It seems to be waning a bit, and if we are talking about religious people in general, I believe that Catholics are still the majority, but not by much, or if they aren't, again, it's not by much that they aren't. But evangelicals are gaining more popularity. So Protestantism is becoming bigger. But people in general, especially Catholics, which I've seen quite a bit, unfortunately, aren't religious, or at least they don't go to church, for instance, which has become quite a big thing too amongst Catholics. That's Catholics that don't go to church, that don't pray, that don't actually try to commune themselves with the Lord, amongst other Christians, which is a bad thing for sure. But officially, we have a considerable number of Catholics. Next question. You said we wanted to be quick.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually the last question before the lightning round. So, before we move on to that, would you like to say anything? Verve, would you like to say anything before we move on to the lightning round?
No, I think we can go right into it. I'm afraid if I say anything else, it will just open up a whole new big topic. So maybe we should just proceed right into it.
Okay, so yeah, like I said, Fabio, this is the lightning round, just quick answers. Some of the questions are kind of funny, kind of silly. Some of them a bit more serious. So, don't take it, too serious. Just give your best answer. Okay, so first question. What are your thoughts on Argentina?
Brazil is better at soccer than them.
Okay, I kind of expected something like that. What is one thing you don't like about Catholicism?
Quite a lot of people try to shame you. For instance, they try to cite a whole lot of scriptures of popes, of encyclicals, in order to try to say you aren't Catholic. When if you've been baptized and you aren't against the core beliefs of the church, there isn't really a reason to do that. That's it.
Sure. What's the best place to visit in Brazil?
Santa Catarina is a very good state. I like Curitiba a lot. So Curitiba is a good goal.
Excellent. And this is ironic to ask an anarchist, but we often throw this question out there. Who's the greatest leader in history?
Man, that's a hard one. I mean, I like Julius Caesar, but I would say Augusto Pinochet.
That's very appropriate. How about, football or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What's better?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, without a doubt.
That is a very appropriate answer for an anarchist. No team sports, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think is the best book in the Bible?
I like Genesis.
Oh, wow, keeping it in the old school. So I'm just curious, this is just off the spot, off of your love of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, apparently. Who's your favorite MMA fighter?
Vitor Belfort.
Excellent answer.
Do you have any more, Brandon?
Yeah, we'll end on one. This is sort of an inside joke, so Fabio, don't take it too seriously. But what are your thoughts on Hitler?
Based.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay. So we might have to have him on again to clarify that.
Okay.
I'm just joking, okay? I don't actually believe he is. Okay.
Okay. We've managed to have a lot of people say controversial things about Hitler. Yeah, that's part of the intent. So, well, thank you so much for coming on, Fabio. You were a very excellent guest, and we'll probably have to have you on again somewhere down the line. Fabio, do you have anything you would like to close with for us?
No, just that I thank you for the opportunity you gave me, and that I really enjoyed being here. That I hope the people listening to this like it, because I want them to listen to different opinions, as I want to listen to your own too. So maybe we could have a call too someday, not because of the YouTube server too, but so that you can clarify what you guys believe in.
Oh, that sounds excellent. All right, so Brandon, do you want to close this out for us?
Okay, sure. Yeah, once again, thanks to Fabio. We learned a lot about Brazil, and as you mentioned, yes, it's great to get different perspectives from people all around the world, and that's something we like to do on this show. Again, if you have made it this far, thank you very much. Please like the video, subscribe if you have not, and we will see you again next time. Thank you.